it. No. All right. I was sitting here thinking to myself, why do people not move homeless people in their homes? Because, like, homelessness could be solved instantly if just a few people are willing to just move people into their homes. And I started, as I was thinking it, I was looking at my dog's kennel, and I was like, this is the reason why people don't move homeless people into their homes. See this? When you get a new dog and you're potty training, or you don't know how the dog is yet, or say if you ever want to train them so that you can go to hotels or get on airplanes with them, you have to use one of these puppies. For a dog first comes in your house when you go to work, you don't leave the dog loose. Dog's in a kennel. We have a very similar contraption for human infants. A human infant comes home from the hospital, we don't simply release them into the wild of the home. If I was talking to an audience like that never had human babies thousands of years from now, or just didn't know what people did back then, I would be like, and this is the human crib or playpen. It is simply the same apparatus with the missing piece at the top. When dealing with a small and tiny human, even under 10 pounds, they are considered so dangerous, they must be placed, a danger to themselves and others, placed when unattended in said device. In fact, as they get to be 2 or 3 years old, they still need to be in one of these devices many times, not always. Swim was a nanny, and when she was a nanny for a doctor who owns part of a hospital and is a surgeon, what that lady had was a tent, an expensive tent made for the crib, an apparatus that extended over the top of the crib, came back down, secured below itself, and made it so only the nanny or the parent could unzip said crib from the outside. Reason being, they lived in a mansion, and if the little beasties were to have jumped out on their own, they could have drowned in the less than a foot of water, put their finger in a socket, or ate an electric cord, or any number of horrors. A left in a trash can could have choked them, and no one would have known for maybe even 8 hours. So, besides the cameras in the house and the fire alarms and the smoke alarms, because they lived in a mansion, during their adoption process, they were required to put a protective gear over the crib. Now, keep in mind, I know that the ancient records will reflect that in Los Angeles, they have actually put grandmothers in prison who took home children that had fetal alcohol syndrome. And they couldn't afford the top portion, and they simply used something that looked just like this because it works exactly the same, and the child was taller and bigger, and it was because they couldn't sleep at night and they were afraid the child was going to go out and get molested by the neighbor or kidnapped or some shit. And of course the grandmother got thrown in prison because she's a poor lady. She's been rich though. Court is never going to talk about the approved apparatus because it's marketed for babies. So humans don't even take a baby home, a toddler, without the ability to lock said up. We're talking about a full-grown human. You don't know anything about them. It takes, according to CIA book author, it takes, like in other studies he's cited and other studies from other people, it takes 55 hours of one-on-one time spent not in one day, but cumulatively over a period. To have, for your nervous system, your mind, and your body, have a normal person to have a true low level of commitment and attachment. Just getting acquaintance level. Besides the fact that you can't harbor more than 150 close relations because of your brain, your capacities, you can only love 150 people according to the Dunbar number, which is science. Besides that, so city living is 3 off, but yeah. What are we talking about? The Dunbar number. Adults. Okay, so if little children have to be locked up for the safety of themselves and others, bringing a full-grown adult whose history you don't know into your house, and then you're going to go to sleep. Look, let me give you an example. There's a lot of people who are hobos who will not go to a homeless shelter that houses people in an open auditorium where they can all see each other, because what they're saying is those people are deciding where to put everybody. They're choosing the security, and they feel that their ability to find security out on the street and to sleep near people they know is safer than sleeping like within 4 feet of a total stranger that they've never met before with someone 25 feet away who's not allowed to break up a fight if it happens, and then you're just supposed to pass out in front of them, and like that's super dangerous. So most homeless people, unless they're going in a group and the group is allowed to sleep together, they're not going to want to go to a place like the Navigation Center. If it's really hot in Palm Springs, they could do it anyways if they have little apartments they give them. But if you have to sleep in an open air with a bunch of other homeless people, that's dangerous. That sounds really dangerous. No offense, but like, who would do that, right? So if you don't want to sleep next to each other and you complain about it, you don't want to do it, then a person in a house isn't going to want to take you in for the exact same reason that you don't want to be in the shelter. You see what I'm saying? So if over 50% of homeless people tell you, I cannot not sleep in a shelter with other homeless people or other hobos, depending on your case, you could be either one, because there is a difference. A self-identified difference between them, okay? A hobo is a lifestyle choice that you're going to keep making. A homeless person is a person who had a home and became unhomed, and they're trying to get homed again. A hobo is committed to this. They're trying to stay that way for now. They may change their mind later, but at the moment they're in a philosophical thing where hoboing is their choice, okay? Hobos will tell you that. That's the difference. A hobo could be also a bit of a con artist. Like, homeless people are so honest. A lot of times, not always, but a lot of times when people get homeless, they're just super honest. They just weren't willing to lie in court. They weren't willing to do this. They weren't willing to do that. And so their whole life fell apart. If they had been willing to tell just a few small lies, it would be just fine right now. They'd still be in their house, right? But they wouldn't take care of that one program, even though nobody ever investigates that would have helped them keep their house from foreclosing, because they couldn't lie about the such and such situation. They were unwilling to say what they needed to say in court, even though they deserved half the business. They needed to say certain things, and they just were unwilling to. They ended up homeless because there's a certain amount of homeless people that once had owned businesses, ran churches. There's just a certain amount of them, okay? When those people are out there, they're trying to get back in a home, and usually, but not always, a lot of people blame it on addiction, but a lot of times it's really not. A lot of times it's because they're just a little too honest. Hobos are grifty. A hobo knows how to, like, a hobo has no problem using 3 tax identification numbers and pulling out welfare number and 3 names and getting emergency aid in all of them, and then getting hotel stay in a whole town and using up all that money and then moving to the next town and doing it again. Hobos do some shit when they talk to you. If you ever talk to a hobo, okay, let me tell you how a hobo lives. Well, a hobo could be supposedly homeless, and they might not sleep on the streets in 20 years of hoboing. They may or may not. They may or may not jump on a train. They may or may not sleep in their van. They may or may not sleep on a plane. They may or may not go from couch to couch. They may or may not, you don't know. But usually, there's a few things. One, their level of philosophical style argument, you have to be pretty on your toes to hold on to what they're trying to do, to even get into the debate, to the discussion, or even pretend to be part of it. You have to be on your toes because they're too developed. They don't like people, whoever you are. Like, if you were John Wayne and you walked up to a hobo, the hobo would be like, "You motherfucker, why do you think you have the right to walk up to me today? But that's probably why people like Keanu Reeves like to go hang out with hobos secretly. It's not because they're doing charity. It's because they just want somebody who's not going to kiss their ass for a couple minutes. That's all. Hobos are fucking con artists. They make no claim to be good people. They know how to scam the fucking system. They know how to go into a house how to look up records, how to find out houses that are empty, how to find out a house that if they stayed in it for that night and they showed some rental paperwork and they made up a fictitious person who let them in there, that no court of law would be able to hold them in any jail. I've talked to hobos. Hobos come from families that where their uncle is like celebrated. I mean, this one hobo and I'm thinking of specifically right now. His grandfather was actually a general in really high up in the a well-known general really high up in the southern side, and his family are all Masons. He's super smart, and he said that he came up with his own religion after reading like all the books in his grandfather's hall and all this other stuff. He decided he couldn't be one of them, but it's not really because he's so righteous. It's because he actually has come up with a system so intense, okay, that I don't think that any of them would be able to do it. It's absolutely insane. It's absolutely insane, right? But it's not like he's really smart. He's really smart, but like the system is like, he doesn't commit actual crimes that I know of, but the system that he believes the entire universe runs off of, or not the whole universe, but the parts of it that he's aware of that he talks about, he thinks it's worse than Kabbalah. Well, that's why he's got his own shindig. Whatever is going on with him is going on with them. Usually with hobos, one of the things you're going to notice is that most of the time they speak more clearly than people. Like if you stop and you have a conversation with them, their conversation is generally like more. They might be grouchy, but it's more clear once you're talking to them that they're talking about things that usually you'd have to go to a Harvard professor to discuss, or some kind of strange eclectic kind of highly educated people to have a conversation like this. They're also con men. They also don't claim to be good people. Usually they're quite embracing of the fact that they think that they're bad people. Some of them will tell you that they don't commit crimes themselves, but that they psychically get other people to commit crimes. Usually they eat better food than the general public and more organic produce and lean protein than the general public. Hobos are fucking tricky. And so they've been tricky since the 90s. They've never stopped it. Since I've met hobos, hobos have never ceased to be tricky. Homeless people, on the other hand, are people who are really they're usually, not always, but usually it's a good person who had a home, who didn't know how to be cutthroat, didn't know how to maintain alliances on a certain level, and then when they fell on hard times, their whole life fell apart. And they're kind of like, they would never take out 4 welfare fucking payments in one town and anonymously and on an emergency basis and line it up so they have hotel rooms every night in a different name. They wouldn't use these programs over and over again under aliases as if and take on identities. A homeless person is there because they don't do those things. They don't know how to do them. And so that's why you mix people up when they're homeless. You're mixing up homeless people with hobos. It's a huge fucking difference. It's a huge fucking difference. Someone who's trying to get back into a home is the ideal, we want our home back, versus someone who is committed to a lifestyle. Like, okay, in Pinocchio, a hobo is like the fox and the fox, is it a fox and a hound or a fox and a something? A fox walks by with his buddy when Pinocchio is like in like his hey Pinocchio, right? Hobo is more like that guy. All right. Um, so from there, the reason why homeless people are not just instantly um, moved into people's houses is because most people who are homeless would not live in a house or next to each other either. So then a person in a home, if you wouldn't be near someone in a shelter like that with just no space between you and stuff, most people would turn it down. Most people in a home would turn it down. And the reason why is because even with an infant that we're related to, who we could easily overpower, we require cribs, which are the equivalent of a small cage. And just to feel safe, for everybody to feel safe. And so if people were to move homeless into their house, they'd have to have a cage room so that the smoke alarm, or if there was a flood or anything, you would know about it instantly. You'd have to have cameras that went to some sort of like database where neutral third parties could watch all the cameras. It'd have to have a door going to be outside so the person could leave whenever they want, but they wouldn't be able to get into the rest of your house. So like you could like cage off a portion, like you could cage off a portion of your house with air conditioning, beds, everything else, smoke alarms, cameras to public location, and you could let people check in at a certain time, right? Like if they showered somewhere. I say that because then you'd have to install public showers and bathrooms on every block for homeless people so that they could use the public shower and bathroom. And then, like, as long as they're law abiding and reasonable, then they could check in at like 8 p.m. and get out by like 7 a.m. Then people would probably, if they could put them in a little caged area where if they did anything at all, the police would come pick you up and take you out, and you could not go back to that person's house again. Not only that, you wouldn't be able to case the joint because they could put up partitions on the outside of the cage. But you'd have a door out and you could leave whenever you want. But they'd have to make a huge crib in the house, essentially, because if you need one for a baby who's related to you, how would an adult that's not related to you that not require a crib as well? With the exit so that you wouldn't be trapped in the house. And then cameras, like cops have cameras on it that go to like neutral, like third party locations, so that if anybody abuses you, it's going to be instantly noted that the police will be dispatched. And the cage should work both directions. Like it should be passing some inspection, and you can go check it before you go in there, so you feel safe from the people as well. You know what I'm saying? And then if you're going to do that, then why would you like put them in a house? Why wouldn't you just put like a tiny house on every block? And like put like one tiny house per block that has an integrated smoke sensor water alarm on it, tied into the local police station, so you don't catch the log on fire. A limit on how many friends are allowed to be brought into the and and no loitering, because the people who live there don't loiter around. So like if the people who live there aren't loitering around, you're only allowed to do what they're allowed to do. And if their friends don't loiter around, then your friends can't loiter around. And so, like basically, like at that point, though, you'd have to keep cameras on the tiny house to make sure that the hobo wasn't molested by rich folk. Well, I'm just saying, you don't want nothing bad to happen to the hobos. That's why you have to have cameras on their houses. They have to become this. So then you might as well move it out into a tiny house in the neighborhood. And then at that point, you probably, that's probably what you could do, because I've tried thinking of ways to deal with homelessness, and I've only come up with a small number of plans. I really have thought of it from every single fucking angle that I could think of, right? And by the way, I'm somebody who has offered to take people home that I don't know when they've dealt with homelessness. Now, in one case, it was a guy. We brought him home, showered him, fed him dinner, and then found him another place to stay with someone we knew. Then another incident, I was living with a friend, and I was living with him, but like he brought home a whole, almost, I don't know, I feel like it was close to a dozen peace punks while his mom was out of town. And because his mom was one of my second moms. He and I never we were never like we were not boyfriend girlfriend. We're just like buddies. And um he his mom had gone on a business trip and she was like, "You two are 15 years old and I feel like I can trust you to keep the house for 2 weeks. Now the neighbor's gonna check up on you every day and she's gonna make sure there's food in the house and that you've gone to school." And like it's like so basically like we had a 5 or 10 minute check-in. Um once a day or something like that with the neighbor who shared a wall. So if the smoke alarm had gone off in the middle of the night, if anything happened, like or there was guests that weren't authorized because the apartment was in like one of those courtyards with like the gate you have to go through, the neighbor would see it and the neighbor would report it. And in addition, the neighbor would know if we looked like we were clean, if we were leaving to school in the morning. And as long as we stopped in and checked in, she would also know that we weren't high out of our minds. There wasn't anything too crazy going on. Because we were like 15 years old. So she was like, "You should be okay." So she had this business meeting out of town that was supposed to last for 2 weeks. It was a symposium and all this other shit. It was all important and it was something she was really looking forward to because you know how it is, like she's a gorgeous woman with like long flowing red hair and her name's Melody and she's very she actually back then she was diagnosed with multiple personality disorder and her dad is a police officer quite and she her therapist was helping her write the book. The book is probably out there. It's just not under her name. But basically her dad was super abusive and ran a minor like a mini cult at home. And I won't even go into the abuse because she said that the abuse that happened, like there was a lot of stuff she left out of her book because she said that her and her therapist talked about it. And people who are into child abuse will sometimes read people's accounts of how they were abused and get turned on by it. So like you have to write your stuff in a formalized manner enough if you don't like that to not have that ever happen. And so I remember she was talking about how they had to edit like a shit ton out of the book because the concern also is that victims sometimes when they have like a amygdala shutdown can get an involuntary, it's not like where you feel turned on psychologically, it's like an involuntary physical reflex and it can cause PTSD. And so basically, so they had to omit a bunch from the book. And because it would be not good, Melody didn't like the idea of people reading it, using it as a Playboy magazine or some fucking pervert, you know what I mean? Because that's what her therapist, so her and her therapist were working on the book and talking about it, I believe, with the editor, I believe, and that the thing was, is they were like, what the concern was, is that you want to be able to get your story out, but you don't want people who are perverts to listen to it and go find your stuff in order to get off. Okay, it's a real phenomena. Let me explain. Do females read romance novels? Do females who are who have a sexual preference for men, heterosexual females, a certain percentage of heterosexual females read either short stories or read romance novels that tell stories and they read them to psychologically get high and stuff like that. Yes, they absolutely do. Women read romance novels to get a psychological high. So I've known women, it's very interesting. The percentage of women that read romance novels to get high are really cute. They're always really fascinating because you always have a sense about them that they live a very secret other life that no one really completely knows about. Like it's like Superman, you know, Superman has the glasses and the demure look, but like, right? Women who read romance novels give off this vibe like there's this entire secret world that they live in, and that like one day, no one knows when or how, or even if it's one of those things that regular people can't see. Like they say, like if you don't expect to see something, you have no context for it, you won't be able to see it. It'll be invisible to you. So maybe you won't see it when it happens, but it's gonna happen, and it probably already has, but it happens all the time probably. But like, someday she's gonna blow up. Not literally like spontaneous combustion necessarily, but like, anyways, like Gabrielle in The Vampire Lestat, like she gets her vampirism and she fucking goes buck wild. She's like, you're not gonna cage me anymore. I don't belong to any man. Not my son, not my ex-husband, not fucking anyone. I take who and what I want. Pirates. Anyways, so like, that's one thing I have to tell you. I'm gonna have a dispute. Do I have anybody here watching this? Okay. Well, I'm gonna talk to you about something. It involves mothers. My mother, Yvonne, supposedly reposed, even though I'm of a rhizomic philosophy. I have parts that are very rhizomic philosophically, but I also have a mother. And I have other parts that are very related to that as well. So, my mom, when she reposed, supposedly, I say supposedly reposed because we live in a multidimensional universe, and how do you know that the person isn't like so much more than you think and so much more interesting than you could stand, that you painted them as some simpleton dumb, some sith, so that you could just feel like important. And so they had to pretend to die in your universe because they couldn't stand to play the only roles that you'd left them. But that they didn't really die. They're still alive in other universes and other multidimensional places. But that what you saw die, because they would never die for you, was actually collectively an amalgamation of all of the people who mirrored them poorly is the person that they would never want to be, and the death you witnessed was your own. Not your own literal, like for every part of you, but like in a sense, the part of you that could have believed in that part of that person being that without being challenged and it making you feel so bad. Which means that you would always hope that's why I believe in resurrection, because I believe ultimately all the people that have died are still here, and they're just like essentially waiting for a moment of more gravitas to come back, because I know that they didn't really die, because I wouldn't do that to myself. It's very selfish at its core. Do you see how I just told you how selfish it is? Thank you. So basically, which means that people only die in your universe because you have a lack of imagination towards them. That is the most horrible accusation you have ever given. It's because you don't have the imagination or the ability to handle what they really are. So what if they didn't die at all? They just went outside of your purview. What do I mean by that? Okay, so everybody says we operate in this 3D law of reality, right? 3D law of attraction. So you're projecting onto other people roles and jobs that are so boring sometimes that people don't want them. And so they have to pretend to go in your universe, but that's really just the part of you that could believe in them being more that's leaving. They can't really go anywhere. Do you see what I'm saying? Right. It's either that or I go to the religion of myself at 17 before I was exposed to this level of religion, and we don't talk about it, and we pretend it doesn't exist. I have parts of me that do too. And boy, does it feel good. So all this deep philosophical talk at the end of the day, what does it mean? I mean, let's discuss. So in addiction recovery, there are two models of recovery. One is the CBT model, cognitive behavioral therapy, used by like SMART recovery, AA, NA, a lot of groups use it. It's the pyramid of thought, feeling, behavior. behavior. And if you can interrupt the thought, you can interrupt the cycle, and you can become a true marshmallow person. Everybody's familiar with the marshmallow test. So say like you're already driven to get that second marshmallow. You have that drive to get the second marshmallow, but you keep like getting distracted before the guy comes back to you, like you have your second marshmallow. Well, okay, everybody knows does everybody know the marshmallow test? I want you to look it up and then come back to this video. If you're serious, you'll go look it up and you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, so with children, and so you're a two marshmallow person, but you're essentially, some people in their addiction are a two marshmallow person, but they're getting interrupted, and they have to learn how to like manage their impulsiveness, because they get bored while they're waiting for the second marshmallow, and then they get a thought, and they're like, let me go get this pleasure, and then they, instead of waiting to achieve the goal, they get interrupted because they sort of have a lack of dopamine. They get a little bit bored, and then they get a thought about pleasure seeking, and then the pleasure seeking in the moment of getting the second marshmallow or doing some other thing seems like a good idea. But if they could just, what they teach you in these models, and it's pretty effective, is that if you can just distract yourself, learn to distract yourself long enough till the researcher comes back in the room, you're going to get your second marshmallow, you'll achieve your goals, and you'll be sober. So I was listening to a SMART meeting, and the guy that was leading it was asking us, like, what is the thought you get right before you do the thing that you're trying to stop doing? And you're trying to break the pattern up. And I was hearing people answer him in a way that was like, a lot of people were saying, but I'm not getting a thought. Like, there was a chunk of people that I hear saying in general, I'm not getting a thought. I'm getting this overwhelming feeling, and then the only thought available is a compulsive thought, like, do this and then you'll be able to think. But if you don't do this, you're not allowed to think. Your whole brain is disassociated offline. It's like an OCD. Like, do you really need to check your oven 10 times and make sure that the oven's turned off? No. You just looked at it a second ago. But you have a horrible feeling of dread, and you're running from a feeling of dread by doing this behavior that you're being told in your mind, just do this, just shut up and do this, and you'll be able to think again if you do it. Just check the stove 10 times. You'll just, don't worry. So now if you take the same thing, a lot of people, I ended up looking it up, and it turns out it's true. It's that some people respond to a top-bottom approach to addiction recovery because they're essentially a two marshmallow person, and the thought comes first. But other people who experience amygdala hijack, who make up a large portion of the addiction community as well, have a different cycle, and it's bottom top, it's documented, and it's feeling thought behavior. When you have the feeling thought behavior pattern, everybody's a hybrid. That's the first thing I should say, actually, to back up, is everybody has a hybrid between the two to some extent. It's just that most people have enough of the cognitive behavioral approach to the things that they do that it can help them. But if you're primarily leaning heavily towards the bottom top approach, not that everything in you is bottom top, but that, because like for me, cigarettes is top to bottom. What do you mean? I am literally one of those people who can pick up a pack of cigarettes, smoke it, set it down, and not even want to touch a cigarette for 4 years. I don't even care. And another day, I might just say, oh, I'll smoke a cigarette for this one thing or whatever. I don't smoke. I don't smoke cigarettes. But I have smoked cigarettes. They just don't addict me. I'm very easily, anytime since I've been a teenager, anytime I picked up smoking, all I have to do is come up with a thought and tell myself the thought about cigarettes and interrupt the thought pattern, and bam, no cigarette. That's why I have no issue with cigarettes. I don't smoke right now, but it's like, that's why there's no issue with cigarettes. It's super easy. I just tell myself cigarettes are gross. Look at how they smell disgusting. They feel disgusting. Everything about them is gross. It seems so classless. Like, I don't put it on other people, but for myself. Like, it seems so classless. Like, you can't even get into an airplane without thinking about one of those goddamn pieces of, and then they smell bad and it's fucking nasty, like, gross. So all I do is tell myself gross, and then cigarettes are out. That's it, gone. Gone. But that is not the case for everything. On other things, I'm bottom to top. And I was talking to my therapist about this, and she was saying actually that this is a real thing. There is a legitimate portion of people who have to use a somatic therapy or a bottom to top approach in order to regain control of their life, which means that you have to interrupt the feeling state, not the thought state. So in areas where you're top to bottom, you interrupt the thought first, and then you break your addiction pattern. But if you're getting an amygdala hijack, what happens is you're getting a feeling state so strong that it's essentially a PTSD type reaction almost. It hijacks your amygdala and your frontal lobe goes offline. That's why they call OCD, right? Like, it's actually a pathological thing that's acknowledged. Like, you get an amygdala hijack where you get such an anxiety, you're running from like such a fear, and then when your frontal lobe's offline, this one thought presents itself. You're somewhat disassociated, and it's check the oven 10 times. You do that. You can't think until you finish doing it, right? And then once you've done it, like, it's like this crazy cycle if you have it. But what happens is some addictions are driven by the bottom to top approach, which is what OCD and anxiety type, those type behaviors are driven by a similar mechanism. It's running from something. You're running from something in order to get relief. And then the behavior is for relief. So on the one group, they're having a thought, then that's a pleasure-seeking thought, right? And then they're creating a behavior loop. That's a top-bottom addiction. Pleasure-seeking. Cigarettes for me, right? If I was going to go on a pleasure-seeking loop, I'd go smoke cigarette. And then when I didn't find it pleasurable, I just tell myself it's gross, and then I'm out of the loop and I just do something different, right? But if it's an addiction that's more like OCD, it's something wired into your nervous system where you get an amygdala hijack, you get an overwhelming feeling, and then a compulsion, like you have to do this thing to resolve the horror. It may not make sense, right? But it's just the thing that you're doing that at that time is how you run from your feeling. Because when you realize that you're trying to get rid of a symptom in the bottom to top approach, essentially you're trying to get rid of a symptom, right? Getting relief from anxiety or dread or something like that, feeling boxed in, whatever it is. You're trying to get relief from something without changing the structure that caused the anxiety in the first place. So then when you wake up from your disassociative OCD 10 times checking things, now you've disassociated so much that you're not looking at your reality to say, like, what is it in my reality that's triggering this? And because you're so preoccupied in anxiety, there's not enough bandwidth necessarily or ability to structurally deal with changing the structure until you have the ability, the bandwidth, and the support system. And a lot of times what happens is people get deeper and deeper. It's like if you're in a pit and every time you take a shovel of sand and you throw it out and a little more sand falls in, if you don't keep shoveling, you'll still get buried alive. The shoveling just keeps you alive, right? So a lot of people living with trauma and PTSD every day of their life is like living in a pit where the sand is always falling in. When you first wake up in the morning, that's when you're going to feel your PTSD the most usually, because the sand has been building overnight, and during the day you're actively shoveling. Another metaphor would be like, say like everybody's born and they get a boat, right? And like, so your boat keeps you afloat in society, and the boat gives you the ability to buy, sell, trade, have occupations, friends, hobbies, health, whatnot, okay? But you need this boat to move around and to do it, to interact with society. The typical normal person has somewhat of a boat, okay? It may not be a grand boat, but it's somewhat of a boat, and it generally keeps the water out. Generally. Even the normal boat, though, you're gonna have to patch this, you're gonna have to tend that. You gotta do stuff with boats all the time. You can just have a boat and never take care of it. It's like having a body and never going to the dentist. But for people who've had a lot of trauma in their childhood, they have a boat that, have you ever seen a boat? Like, people assume when a boat has holes that the boat just sinks under the water. It's not true. Do you know some people have stayed alive in boats that have holes for years? Years. I'm pretty sure of it. I'm making this up right now, but I'm sure it's true. And because if the holes are small enough, okay, then the boat is going to take on water, but you just are always going to need to be, say that the boat is made of something that's buoyant enough that it's going to pretty much stay above water, okay? It's not going to sink, but taking on water, if it's just a little bit for a little time, is okay. But leaving it there and living in it is not good, right? So the person who has a lot of childhood trauma wakes up in the morning, and because the water builds overnight, they have to, first thing when they get up, they can't just get out there, set the sails, look at the map, get on the radio, talk to the other sailors, plan their outing for the day. They have to shovel, the crappy childhood fairy says, she calls it clearing the leaves. She has to journal every morning. I'm having feelings this, to clear all the PTSD from all the trauma. Because until she does it, she doesn't function. And the book by Gabor Mate paints a very clear picture that if you don't express your trauma and your stuff, you're going to die early of any cause. It's probably true. So, you have to deal with it. So every morning you're going to wake up into this water or this sand, however you want to look at it. Crappy childhood fairy calls it the leaves on the window, have to be cleared every morning. The average person just can get up and go, but you have to bail 200 gallons of water every morning out of your ship. Whatever it is. Maybe it's different every day. Maybe some days you get 80 gallons and some days you got 500. But whatever it is, you can't move and you can't go to work and you can't function until you bail this water out. So it takes you a while to get going because you get hit first thing. Once you get the sand and the water out, in order to go to work and sail around on the ocean, trade with other mariners, fish, do this, do that, do the other, the whole entire time, you have to be bailing either A, sand out of your hole, or B, water out of your vessel. Which means that if you don't have employees working for you or 8 hands, it's going to be challenging because you're going to have to run down there, bail water, run up, talk to someone, run back down. So your ability to make money and shuffle around all day long and change your structure is going to be very low. This is a bottom to top approach. So basically what they say is you have to start learning how to identify your feelings. A lot of people use parts work to do that. But learning how to change your environment before the feeling state spikes, learning how to have coping mechanisms to get out of the situation when it happens, and learning how to identify your feelings are things that they say will help. Sort of like when you have an anxiety attack, learning to sit there with the anxiety attack, not run from it. What am I feeling right now? What does this feel like? Try to be curious about it instead of responding to it. And so homeless people, the only way that you'd be able to really fix it, I mean, maybe somebody else will come up with another plan, but it's like the mousetrap. I feel like I've come up with the mousetrap. There's only 3 mice traps out there that work. There's the walk-in version, the snapping version, and the water version. Those are the 3 I know about, and I don't know that there is any better mousetrap than one of those 3. They're all good mousetraps. One uses a bait and drops down and will trap a creature inside. One uses a bait over a bucket, and then when the rat jumps on it, it spins, and then the rat drowns in the bucket. Another one has like a piece of cheese or something, and then the snap comes over on it. But I can tell you this because I have lived in Big Bear, California, and the people at the local hardware store will tell you that the wood mice up there are extremely intelligent, and they will outsmart all of the traps very quickly. And it wouldn't get so far. I had a mouse come in my house a few years ago, and I started putting traps out. And when I would he would take the food off the trap, and then he would get tiny claws, and he would tear up a piece of my furniture right next to the trap, so I would know that he did it. So like he would do something destructive to my property, take the food, and to send the message, I'm taking this food regardless. But if you try to leave a death trap out for me, I'm gonna rip up the back of your couch right next to the trap so that you see and you know that I did this. And it was consistent. It was consistent. Now I went to the local hardware store because I was like, I tried talking to the rats in my head because you can reason with ants sometimes, and but the rats, it left for a few days and then it came right back. So I was like, I went to the hardware store and the guy was like, these wood mice, they're not rats. He said they're wood mice and they get really big and they look like rats, but he said they're brilliant. He said we've watched them here at, what is the hardware store in Big Bear? I can't remember the name right now. Is it Ace or something? I'm not sure. One in the plaza, and so with Vons. And so the guy's like, they're so smart, they will learn how to evade every trap you have. He said, we watch the cameras sometimes, and because we couldn't figure out how they were in the store in the morning, we would find them in the store. And he said that they started watching, and they noticed that they would wait in the shadows outside the store when people are going out in and out during the day, and they time it. And people don't notice it, but that the little wood mice rush in with humans and then take up residence inside the store as long as they can until they get caught. And that they started to avoid every trap that there was. Then they put poison out, and then after a while, the ones that survived knew what the poison smelled like and wouldn't eat it. And he literally, this guy was like, do you remember Rodney Danger? I think it was Rodney Dangerfield in Gopher, where he goes absolutely, he's like a it's Caddyshack. And it's not Rodney Dangerfield either. It's Caddyshack. Basically, I think it's Bill Murphy. There's this gopher, and he absolutely is like so smart, and nobody realizes it, and the guy's like trying to get rid of him, and it's like the gopher ends up doing this dance. But like, this is what the wood mice are like in Big Bear, California. And the guy at the hardware store was a little bit like that about it. Because when I told him I was having a problem, he took it so personally. He was like, you don't know what I've dealt with these mice. And I was like, I have to tell you that when he went off on his spiel, I was like, I believe him, because the mouse in my house was doing property destruction. It was like if you leave an offering out for the mouse, if you're willing to give it an avocado and a few nuts or whatever, it won't destroy, and no traps and no poison, it won't destroy your property. But who wants to do that? I mean, like, I'm literally being forced to leave an offering out for a mouse in order to not be terrorized. And I tried talking to the mouse in my head. I told the mouse, I was like, look, no matter what, if I give you food, you're gonna start running around on the counters, and I'm not gonna know what you touched, and I'm gonna find rat poop here and there. We both know it's true. I said, what if I make you a deal? In my head, I tried it first before I went to the hardware store. I was like, what if I make you a deal? What if you go out to the garage and you can live in the local wood piles and all this other stuff, but if you stay out there, I have rabbit food and I have rabbits. If you don't harm my rabbits, I will give you rabbit food, first of all. Okay, I know it's not the same. You get the choice of everything in my house when you're in my house, but you'll be alive. I'll give you a dish of rabbit food every day. And like, so you know how the rabbits get little like treats, you come out, you bring carrots or pieces of apple or whatever. Like, and I'll bring bonus things like I do for everybody else. Okay. So I'm willing to give you like food out there, but I don't want you in the house having fettered access to my avocados. Have you ever seen like when a child gets into a barrel of apples and they take one bite of every single apple because the first bite is the best and you're like, oh, holy shit. So like he was into that with the avocados. He likes to take just this precious little bite of an avocado and then run off and destroy my avocado. And so I was like, the rat did go out to the garage. It was not a whole week. I want to say it was a little over 3 days. Sometimes I might tell you the story and think it was a couple of days. Sometimes I'm going to say it was 4 or 5. It was probably 3 days. I don't know. He went out to the garage. I was astounded myself, too. I was a little surprised when he listened. He actually, because every day there was a sign that he'd been in the house. We'd already had this, So he goes out to the garage. But after a while, he starts coming back. He can't, it's the avocados, man. He was like, the avocados, the free access, and also the snooping around. Mice and rats are very curious. They're known to, like my uncle had a kangaroo rat that lived in his wall for years. And they had developed a friendly relationship with it, though. I know that sounds weird. It was just one. They only had one. And the one would never let the babies settle in the house. I have a very eccentric uncle. And there was no babies. None of the babies ever settled in the house. That was the only one that was allowed to be there. Okay, so go figure that. And when they moved out of the house, they said they opened the wall and they found like a missing diamond ring, single earring. Oh, they thought it was adorable because baubles and trinkets that had been missing for 20 years, the mouse had been taking them and putting them in the wall like a dragon with a nest of treasures. And sent all its offspring off to the field with you. You may live out there. Because there was a deal, and then not only that, it's sitting on a mountain of treasure. No, maybe that's part of the reason it sent its offspring away. Maybe it wasn't just for the peaceful relations. Maybe it was like a little dragon sitting on a treasure hoard. And so the inner world of mice, who fucking knows what the mouse was doing? For homeless people, for hobos, there's no cure for them not having a home. You'd be surprised how much access to money hobos have because they're not constrained by typical vices. A lot of them aren't addicts either. A lot of them have very clear skin. A lot of them are vegetarians. Did you know that vegans, a lot of vegetarian and vegan hobos who have more like strict diets than most of us. I don't want to say strict, but you know what I mean, because they wouldn't call it strict, but they eat more produce, let's say. A lot of them eat a lot of produce. I don't know, man. I'm just going to say that for homeless people, it's a whole other situation. Because if they don't learn how to be liars, and if they don't have family enough to check on them, probably they come from a family. When you see a homeless person, what you're probably seeing is a person who comes from a family of people who are very good at lying. They're good con artists, they're good liars, whatever part of society, wherever they've landed, they've done a good job at lying. But this particular family member is the one in the family who is a terrible liar, and they said, we're going to throw you out on the streets and ignore you until you learn how to lie and con people like the rest of us. And until then, you might as well just go out there and just suffer. I'm pretty sure something like that is what's going on. I can't be sure, but it seems like it. But somebody else will be in and jump in there and try to give them the old, they're afraid to be like them, and it's their own internal anxieties, but I don't know. I don't know if it is that. I don't know if I agree with that. I'm not sure it isn't. I'm not saying it is or isn't. Because you see some people who should be homeless. Not because they don't work. A lot of homeless people work, by the way. And I have to tell you that a lot of business owners are very lazy. I've been paying attention. The people I know, a lot of people that I know who are business owners, if you were to see what they do during the day, not all of them, okay, but a chunk of them, If you were to see what they do during the day, you would say that they are lazy. Homeless people aren't lazy. No, they're just bad liars. They're no good at being rotten and swindling. If they were willing to be rotten and swindle, or if they were capable of it, they would. The only solution is to make portable tiny houses and give them to everybody. Yep, stackable, portable. They even scare people. They've come up with rumors that FEMA was trying to put you in a box. But basically, what I would do is I create. You know how like those homeless boxes you see, like some people, if you watch YouTube videos, they look like a box. The person can climb in it, climb out. It's like not a fire hazard. They have basic like safety and protection in there. You could even install it make it just a little bigger than that, but you could make it where it's got like sensors on it that would show on the outside of the box and send a message to the fire department if there was fire, if there was like somebody overdosing or anything. You could do that if you wanted to. Yep. And then you'd make them like boxes that have all the basics, the solar panel, composting toilet, like the whole thing, and that has a corner where you could put a high pressure water so that even like if they are, say they get hospitalized or they want to trade their unit in or they need help washing it, that it can go into like some like car wash type setup that just puts a hose thing at the corner, flushes everything out of it, and then just like can clean the entire unit from one hole and then dry it out and give it back to you. Just clear your stuff out first. Yeah, just keep them maintained. Composting toilet for drinking and showers all the time. They reach unhygienic levels. You'd have some kind of like, you know how there's mood rings? You'd have the outside of some part of the outside of it change like a mood ring to show when it needed to be serviced and the person was no longer living in humane conditions. Like if the toilet wasn't getting serviced or the solar panel or like, because you could have a tiny air conditioner, you have smoke alarms, you have everything. You could make it and then make it directly so that they could be slid on the back of a truck or a train and transported. That they could be stacked 2 or 3 stories high so people could go up and down. That there would be designated places in normal neighborhoods that look normal and clean and are upkept, but only are allowed to harbor 2 or 3 boxes at a time. So you can park your box, but in a regular neighborhood and act according to normal neighborhood rules, but like, and even have it transported. But like, I would just give people boxes. A box you could pull behind your car, a box you could put on a train, a box you could put on the back of a truck, a box that you could stack in the middle of the town, but you only can stack 2 boxes per this amount of blocks or whatever. So if the spot's taken up, you got to go to a different spot and apply for that one through some zoning or whatever. A box that you could actually put on a rope and slide behind you and walk with it if you were forced to. A box, like if they find you parked on the side of the road having a nervous breakdown, they have to help you find a place for your box and move you. Like a box, essentially, you could take everywhere. Honestly, if it was done properly, rich people would get jealous of you and wish that they had a box. So that's my only idea. Okay. Well, let's see what we got here.